All right, fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Travis Woods with 4 Point IT, based out here just north of San Francisco. And I am so pleased to be your moderator today for this discussion with good friends of mine and peers from across the nation. But today we'll be talking about cyber resiliency. And part of this is going to be discussing the landscape of the threat landscape this year and what we're seeing in the field. And we'll also be talking about how small businesses can prepare themselves and help defend against those types of attacks. So with that, before we get started, let me just go over a couple housekeeping things. So first of all, again, we're really glad that you're here today. There's chat in the service here that you can throw a thumbs up, smiley faces as there's content that tickles your fancy. Also, if you have questions along the way, go ahead and post those in there. I'll address the questions at the end of the session. And also, this is being recorded for future generations and other people to watch later on. So if you miss any of this, we'll have it available for you after the event. So we'll be about 30 to 40 minutes. And with that, I'd like to introduce my panelists here today. Michael, please.
Thank you, Travis. Mike Drobnis here with Optfinity. We are based in Springfield, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. We are a full-service managed services provider. We do everything from providing a 24/7 help desk to on-site support, as well as websites, mobile apps, phone systems, and through our cybersecurity division, Perusity, we offer cybersecurity services.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks again for being here today. And also, Michael, I wanted to thank you for getting this organized and putting this together for all of us. This is a great opportunity. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Bob, would you please?
Absolutely. So my name is Bob Oster. I'm with Inspire Technologies. We're in the greater New Orleans area, servicing the Gulf South of the United States. We as well are an IT service provider. I call it an IT management and security firm. Really what we're looking to do is be the consultant for all our customers and kind of decide where their cybersecurity needs fit, their cyber resiliency needs fit, and of course their business processes when it comes to technology. And we'll talk about that more later.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much, Bob. And Chris, my close neighbor here. Good to have you on the call.
Thanks, Travis. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Reed, and Travis is right. We are geographical neighbors here. My firm is also based in the San Francisco Bay Area in the North Bay. My firm is Veris Technology Solutions, and we, as well, we're an IT service provider working with small and medium-sized businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area, companies from as small as 5 users up through about 100 users, and we really aim to be the quote one-stop shop for anything in terms of IT support that our clients need, all the way from simple day-to-day help desk and IT support, equipment procurement, security, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, through IT strategy. So I'm pleased to be with you all, and looking forward to the discussion today.
So to jump right into things, again, we're here to discuss cybersecurity and cyber resiliency, and there's a significant difference between the two. But to really understand where we are today, everyone is hearing in the news the number of hacks and attacks that are happening that are causing disruptions in almost everyone's lives, whether you're trying to get gas because you heard there's a run on fuel, or your information has been hacked and leaked out on the dark web. Everyone today is affected by this, and now more than ever, it seems that yes, large corporations are always targeted. Let's think of Verizon, Equifax, Target. We could go on, but the folks that are probably least prepared for that are going to be the small businesses. So with that, let me just hit you up with some statistics that really demonstrate who the target is and the effectiveness of it. So according to the Verizon 2018 data breach, the investigation report that came out of that breach, 57% of all cyber attacks, or 57% of cyber attacks, were targeting small businesses. Now, why small business? Usually because they don't have the resources or the time to address the issues that can protect them. So that makes them real easy targets. In addition to that, as we move on, the types of threats that we're seeing here, this is something we pulled from the SonicWall annual threat report. So we're seeing massive jumps in things like ransomware attacks and IoT attacks. So not only are our computers and networks being attacked, but so too are our thermostats, our cameras, and our refrigerators as well. So those all fall under IoT. But the most alarming, though, is the ransomware attacks, because it has become such a profitable way of generating income for nefarious actors. So again, sticking with small business, another thing that we learned is that many small businesses lack any type of cybersecurity plan. Now, if you're working with a good managed service provider, like the folks we have here at the table, then that's probably not true. But what that means is there's a whole large percentage of the small business population that's not protected and doesn't really understand what's happening or have a clue as to how to prevent it. And what that equates to is that that will cause significant cost and significant disruption in their business. So on average, there was for 2019, this report here indicates that there was about a $2 million loss for companies that were hit with ransomware or some sort of threat. Most small businesses will not survive a hit like that to their bottom line, I'm sure. So when we're talking about what are the stakes here, it's being in business or not being in business. So the threats are significant and very real for small business. Are we talking about just, as far as like protecting these small businesses, are we talking about just employing cybersecurity tools? Do we just need more tools? Or is there more to building resiliency? And Michael, I'd love for you to kick us off on this question.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. A couple days ago, we were talking about the hack with the oil and how gas stations were making a run for it because they got hacked. And then you wake up this morning to hear about JBS, the largest meat producer in the world, and how their computer systems were taken offline. And so you look at it and say, all right, well, yes, cybersecurity is going to prevent certain types of attacks. But in reality, what we're looking at is cyber-resiliency. And what that means is we have to be able to anticipate and withstand and recover from what happens. So yes, sure, security is great, but all of us are going to be hacked. It's just going to happen. It's just going to be a matter of time. So we have to look at it and say, all right, what will happen and how do we minimize the stress, the attack, and the resources that we're going to suffer those attacks from? So in a perfect world, our systems are going to run 24 hours a day. They're going to run 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But obviously, we don't live in a perfect world. Things happen. So when they do, we have to come up with a way to carry on and to keep our business operating. So fighting through that adversity. So if we look at the example of that with the Colonial Pipeline disaster, their problem was twofold. One, their systems were hacked, they suffered ransomware, and they couldn't move their oil from the East Coast or from the refineries to the East Coast. Second of all, their billing systems were interrupted, so they didn't even know who to be able to bill from there. So what they had to come up with was a plan. And unfortunately, their plan involved paying the ransom, but they had to come up with a plan that allowed them to say, hey, if this occurs, what do we do? That is cyber resiliency. It's not only coming up with ways to protect yourself, it's ways to staying in business.
And keying off what Michael said there, Chris, when's the best time to come up with that plan?
Well, thanks for that, Travis. And well, obviously, the best time is ahead of time, and to really work on that, it involves looking at your business and looking at the different systems that you use. And as Michael and Travis both pointed out, this is not just about big businesses. Big businesses are the ones who tend to make the headlines, but in some of the statistics that Travis showed, the threat is just as real to small business, and small businesses in general don't have nearly the resources to apply to this problem. But what you, as a small business, what you can look at is what are your different systems and how are those individual systems protected? And we're going to be talking about some of the key areas of protection as we have this dialogue. But I think really the first step there is to be looking at what are the major platforms or systems technology-wise that your organization uses. Some very simple example is email. Basically, all organizations use email and have a high reliance on that as a key business tool. So one of the things to look at is what would your business do if email was not available for a period of time? Many of us use service providers like Microsoft with their Office 365 platform for email services, and they're a very solid provider, but no service is perfect. And so we all have to look at even a relatively simple situation like that, which doesn't involve a nefarious act or a hack of any type, but still those services that we really rely on are not 100% reliable. And so you need to have plans even for some fairly simple things like that of how your business can continue to operate without key tools.
Bob, I see you shaking your head. Did you want to contribute to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm thinking through here is, of course, we're here in the Gulf South, and we're synonymous for hurricanes, and everyone here has a hurricane plan. We know what's going to happen. We've learned our lesson with Hurricane Katrina's and so forth. But what we don't have a plan for is those small things, right? What happens when the firewall goes down? What happens when a server has a problem? What happens when there is a cyber attack? And so what you really want to do is just lay out all the different scenarios, right? Hurricanes are easy to plan for. I can predict them 3 days in advance, and I know they're coming, and I can pretty much guarantee what's going to happen depending on where they're going and how powerful they are. Cyber attack, you're not going to plan for. So you have to anticipate, just like Michael said, write out all those scenarios, figure out what's going to happen, and then make those plans accordingly.
So what are some of the approaches that you guys take to build that plan? Michael, if you'd like to take that.
Well, sure. When you're looking at the plan, you have to look at a variety of things. Obviously, is the technology involved, but more importantly, is you also have to look at the people. As we realize that most cybersecurity breaches are a result of a human aspect, whether that be somebody providing their password, providing the information for social engineering. An example of that is we all use LinkedIn. We all put our information on LinkedIn that identifies who we are. Now, obviously, that's the point of LinkedIn. It's to build those social circles. But if you put the information that say, hey, you graduated, from the University of Virginia in the year 2000, well, in the year 2020, you're going to get an email from a scammer saying, hey, don't forget you have the 20-year reunion coming up. Come here and fill out your profile information. And so, it'll ask you information that you'll add in there. So when we look at the plans, we're looking at what are those things that are human involved that we can help protect. So for example, security awareness training. We want all of our clients and all of our clients' end users to be aware of the types of things to watch out for. What to look at in an email that makes it fake. Okay, is it not directed to you individually, to whom it may concern, dear sir, dear ma'am, things that are so general in nature. So we make them take these training classes. And then we send out these tests on a weekly basis and try to get them to click on things they shouldn't have so that they can at least learn from it. Additionally, teaching people the importance of passwords. And what I mean by the importance of passwords, it's not using the same password. You couldn't believe how many people use their cat's name, their dog's name as their password, which they then put up on Facebook. Hey, here's me and Fluffy, doing whatever. And obviously the password's fluffy123 on every single account they have. So how do you improve that? Do you use multi-factor authentication so that those who do use their cat's name, you can have them use a second factor, such as their cell phone, a text, or an app to do that. And then lastly, you obviously hear about patching, and everyone who has Windows 10 knows that, especially at home, their machines reboot when they don't want them to because they never save their files. Well, patching is a inherent problem because everything is built by people. And so as it was built by people, we want to make sure that those vulnerabilities are patched properly.
Bob, what are some other steps that you encompass in your plans?
So everybody has an antivirus. One of the things we preach is that an antivirus is not enough anymore. So we're looking at, endpoint protection, antivirus, anti-malware, web filters that are put in, and of course the patching. Make sure that that's all complete. And the next thing we're really looking at is, for the resiliency, is your backup plan. I can't tell you how many customers I get that have a synced plan, right, where all their data is synced to another site or a cloud service or anything like that. But what they don't realize is it's not a true backup. And as you can imagine, when something happens in one location, it just syncs over to the other. So if you have ransomware, that same ransomware gets synced to the other side. So you want to make sure that you have offline backups. And we really preach a three-pronged approach to that. If you have a server, turn on the server previous versions, the shadow, or they call it shadow copies. Get that twice a day snapshot of all your files so that you can easily restore to a previous version. Then you want to have that backup, whether it be a file level or image based, directly to some kind of appliance locally. Even if it's a USB drive, but hopefully, a nice appliance would be ideal so that you can restore quickly. What happens when that user deletes a terabyte of data, right? You don't want to download that from the internet. You're going to be waiting quite a while. And so have that restore locally, and then rely on the cloud as a last resort. And then finally, don't just rely on the cloud if you have cloud servers. Verify their retention policy, their backup policy, and if you can, integrate some kind of third-party archive or third-party backup that keeps the files separate so that if someone does hack in, they don't have access to it.
While we're on the topic of tools, Chris, you'd also mentioned about monitoring and maintenance aspects of your plans. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's important as we start talking about these individual details, and all of this, all these specific points that we're talking about are definitely relevant to the overall securing of your environment and providing the sort of most secure, most safe IT environment that you can. A key step that's often missed is the monitoring of that. So rather than just putting controls in place like the backup mechanisms that Bob just mentioned, it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Rather than just putting a mechanism in place, those mechanisms need to be monitored and maintained. And in the case of backups, even do test restores to be able to ensure that those platforms are doing what they are intended for. Same is true for other mechanisms, the relatively simple mechanisms of what we call endpoint backup. That's the antivirus or anti-malware tools that get installed on individual computers. But it's important to be reviewing the results of those to see what kind of activity is happening. And those are the kinds of monitoring that firms like the four of ours do on a consistent basis for our clients.
Good. So let me ask a little bit more as we talk about the cybersecurity plans here. So those are all some key parts of the plan. How do you see that benefiting your clients in the plans that you guys have put together? What are some of the proof that this is the right approach? Bob, would you like to start off with that?
Sure. I'll go back to that whole hurricane plan, right? I mean, that peace of mind, knowing that if something happens, you've got a script, right, a process that is going to take place and go into position anytime anything happens. I can't tell you how many businesses, one, I've had to pay that ransom, right, because they didn't have that good backup. They weren't monitoring it. Or they said, yeah, we have a backup and it hasn't worked in 6 months. No business is going to recover from restoring files from 6 months ago. That's not going to help many people. So really having that in place and documented and not saved on the server, by the way, documented somewhere so that every employee knows what to do if email goes down, if the phone system goes down, if their data goes down, or even just the internet in general, especially if you're working off the cloud. Have something in place where everyone knows what to do if that happens, so they can continue working, or at least not be down or running around finding out what's going to happen for a full day. At least have some kind of alternate communication to let people know how they should proceed.
Michael, I'm sure you've seen similar results. Do you want to share some of that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and I can say that, we're talking about two types of ransomware. We have the type of ransomware right now where people get all their data encrypted. And then, as Bob said, if you don't have good backups, you're quite a bit in trouble. The bigger issue, and the thing we're seeing today, is we're seeing the ransomware where they're taking the data first, then encrypting the data, and then threatening to release it. Now, while that hasn't affected any of our clients, I can tell you a large school system that is in this area had that exact problem, and then personnel data was thrown up there. So, resilience is more than just, okay, how do we get back and running? It's also going to take part of how do we keep the organization going? Now, I can say, knock on wood, I can say we've been lucky. We've only had one client who's had to deal with ransomware, and we had a backup system in place that stored revisions. As Bob alluded to earlier, yes, the initial backup copy was also encrypted, but we also had revisions. So we had the revision of every single file prior to that backup. So for us, the actual restoration took 4 hours for a 45-person firm. Now, we spent a lot more time than that making sure we figured out where it came from. And believe it or not, it came from somebody who opened up an email, which was addressed as a resume. They opened up the Word document, and the Word document said, hey, would you like to run this macro? And the user said, of course I would. They ran the macro, which installed the virus, and we were able to catch it, so it only affected one drive of the many. But still, that is how easy it is to spread. And if the users aren't trained well enough not to do that, that's the problem. But a benefit was they only had access to a certain subset of the server, so only that subset was affected, which is, again, another cyber resilience plan of limiting administrative access to the network.
Got it. So it sounds like a good cybersecurity plan resiliency plan is going to encompass both technical and the people aspect of a business. Chris, could you expand on that a little bit about the importance of that?
Yeah, you bet. I actually meant to make that point earlier, that when we look at cyber resilience, it really is very much a multi-factor, to use that term again, process where, and as Michael indicated, it is both human, has human implications and technology implications. And so, some of the simplest ones, they don't even have to be these external threats like ransomware. I think Bob mentioned earlier, the simple idea of, what if your internet connection goes down? Businesses in general, and our firms included, have moved many of our clients to using largely, if not entirely, cloud-based services, which have great benefits to business for sure. But they do come with a corresponding liability that we now, in running our businesses, we have this increased dependence, reliance on the internet. And many clients, at least when we start working with them, will find that they have a single internet connection. And that becomes essentially a single point of failure for pretty key parts of their business, if they're reliant on cloud systems it might be their accounting system, it would definitely be email, it might be Slack for internal communications, or Zoom for communicating with clients, and all those kind of things. The minute the internet goes down, those services are down. So, one of the things that we look at, which is a very simple mechanism technologically, is to be able to have a secondary internet connection, which can either act as a failover, or in a little more complex scenario, internet traffic can actually be balanced between two different internet connections. And in that, you're eliminating a liability there that says, oh, if your local single internet connection goes down, then all that communication stops. So gets back to my earlier point of really looking at the sort of complete picture of the business technologically, of all the services that are being used, and identify what the really key ones of those are, and ways to make those services more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a business level conversation, as along with, in addition to just throwing tools at the problem as well. So Bob, did you want to add anything else about the business level conversation to a good cyber resiliency plan?
Yeah, no, you're right on target there. One of the things that I think a lot of companies like ourselves bring to the table is that business mindset, right? I mean, the technology part is easy. The tools are available. The tools are out there. Anybody can really go out and find enough tools to throw at a solution. It may slow down the computer so much you can't use it, but you're protected, right? But it takes that holistic and 35,000 foot view from a business mind to really put together that plan. The one thing I want to point out is, I know a lot of small businesses don't think they have the resources to do this, but as you can imagine, this is not a daunting task for a small business. It's just a matter of setting aside the time to go through and pinpoint the intricacies, the little things that you need to do, the little things what could go wrong, and really a couple of brainstorm sessions with a good IT provider can get you a full plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's something you revisit regularly. Michael, how often do you guys to try to review that plan with your clients?
So every one of our clients we meet with once a quarter, and during that time frame, we're going to review not only the issues we deal with, ticket issues, projects, etc., but we're going to review, pretty much go over what happens if. I mean, and that's really the question. Bob was just saying, that small businesses worry, okay, do they have the resources, whether it be financial or otherwise, to do this? The question I always ask my clients is, well, what if you don't do it? Then what happens? It's that ounce of prevention question. If you do not spend the time to make sure you can stay in business, well, that's great. You can not spend the money now. You will spend it later. To the point where majority of organizations do not recover from a disaster, whether that be an employee disaster, a cybersecurity disaster, whether that be a hurricane. Now, obviously, we don't see many of that here in the DC area, but we have the government shutdowns. It's almost like a hurricane. So from our perspective, I mean, there are still shutdowns, but a lot of small businesses don't see that. And obviously, here we are coming out of the COVID pandemic, where a lot of businesses went out of business. And those that didn't were the ones that took that preventative measure, whether that been restaurants who switched to takeout, whether it had been other organizations who switched to remote working, which all of us here in the IT world, all of our clients went to that remote aspect. But that is no different than anything else. That is a cyber resilience plan. It was the ability to say, hey, we can no longer work in person for a public health reason, and now we have to work remote. Well, that's just another method of cyber resilience, and that's what we really need to keep a look at, is how do we stay in business no matter what happens.
Yeah. And as the statistics have shown, a small business taking a hit of $2 million for the business implications of a ransomware attack or a cyber threat or a breach of that sort. I don't know many small businesses that could take that kind of a hit and then keep going. So that's significant. Well, that's fantastic information. I think you guys have provided real actionable items and some real keys as to what it takes to build that plan, areas of your business to protect with that plan, and again, the maintenance and ongoing look at how that plan evolves with your business as well. I'm going to give you guys a second to go around the table here and just give some key takeaways that resonate with you, either things that you've seen in the past, but just some key takeaways on resiliency. Chris, I'll start off with you if you would, please.
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway I would have is that all these elements that we're talking about of cyber resiliency, they change over time. It's a changing landscape. We've been as a community, as a world, we've now all gone through this experience. Thankfully, we appear to be coming out of it here in the U.S. of COVID and how that's affected our business, and some very dramatically. Others, have been able to better weather that storm. But 18 months ago, we had, as a business community, we'd never been through anything like that. Now, we all in our firms, we're talking with our clients about work from home strategies, mixed strategies where there's going to be part of work done in the office, part at home. And we have many clients who 18 months ago, their business model was everybody comes to the office every day and they sit at their computers, and when they're done at night, they go home. And pretty much every one of our clients has now gone to saying, we're going to be in some kind of mixed model moving forward. That's a huge shift. Now, not every period of 15 or 18 months is going to produce such a dramatic change, but I just use that as an example of the strategies and tools needed for cyber resiliency change over time. The landscape changes. And so that's, groups like the four of us, we collaborate a lot to talk about how that landscape is changing, and as a result, how we can collectively best protect our clients against the changing threats, even if those threats are not of the sort of hacker variety.
Right. Yeah. Michael, any key takeaways here for as far as the resiliency goes?
Well, yeah, sticking with the central theme I've come up with, which is people. Chris is right. Things in technology is going to change. The way we do things is going to change. But what's not going to change is we're going to rely on people to utilize these tools. And so we have to keep our employees, our end users, we got to keep everybody in line with, hey, this is what is happening. This is how we prevent it. This is the training we need. These are the strong passwords. It's all about education. The more we educate our users, the less trouble we're going to have. And there are so many great tools, whether it be training, security awareness, password tools to just make sure you use different passwords. But people is the key element we need to make sure we're doing a good job with.
Fantastic. And Bob, last word for you, please.
Gladly. So I want to pinpoint kind of the thing that Chris had addressed earlier, and that's the monitoring aspect, right? Plans are great. They're good to have, but if your plans aren't working, you have to adjust, right? And you have to have someone checking it out. And the backup is the perfect example. But even the antivirus, there's nothing worse than having an antivirus installed and it hasn't been updated in a year. That's not protecting anybody. Same with patching. If it is not being done on a regular basis, the vulnerabilities are there constantly. So my main takeaway is make sure that you have a plan, it's being monitored, and then it's being visited, like they said, on a regular basis. I know we tend to change payroll companies here and there. We change the tools that we're using. We change, personnel, right? Personnel come and go. Don't forget to make sure, as Michael said, train those new employees on your way of doing things. Don't assume that they came from a good environment and that they learned good cyber resilient, skills.
Cyber hygiene is what we're talking about.
Nice.
Brush and floss. Got it. Well, fantastic. Gentlemen, I want to thank you guys so much for your time today and the contributions that you've put together. This has been a fantastic session. I think like I said, I think we delivered. We've got some really great actionable items for folks to take a look at in reviewing it. And of course, working with a good managed service provider means that you're having these conversations, means that you are prepared for these types of scenarios that can play out, whether they're cyber related, government shutdown related, or good old Mother Nature throwing her best at us, that you are absolutely prepared in one way or another to maintain your company's ability to operate. So super important. We've got a couple questions here from the audience. One question I was going to attack was, what are some other types of cyber attacks that we need to be aware of? And let me go, Michael, would you like to grab those? I talked about a couple of them, but would you like to talk about some of the other types?
Yeah, no, happily. So, I mean, obviously, we've talked about ransomware. We can talk about that. I mean, that's probably the most important one in today's day. You're going to hear about it. It's in the news. It's having a huge impact. IoT, for those of you who are not familiar with Internet of Things, this is pretty much how everything is interconnected. And, the joke I like to talk about is, you get on the scale in the morning, check your weight, and, you're a little bit overweight. You go downstairs and the refrigerator is locked and won't let you in because you've eaten too much. Well, just think about that. I mean, whether it be the Nest thermostat or everything else, the problem is we have, I think they said about 11 or 12 billion devices that are now interconnected on the network. If you think about those things, what happens when those are taken over by hackers? I mean, today, a pacemaker is controlled by Wi-Fi. Can you imagine the power somebody would have to say is pay this ransom, or I'm going to shut off, or I'm going to shock your heart? And then, from a business perspective, obviously we have the IoT devices, but you also have people who love to bring in their own devices. I mean, couldn't tell you how many times we've walked into a place and they're complaining about the network and this and that. We found out somebody brought in a Wi-Fi access point and just plugged it into the network because they wanted a better Wi-Fi signal. So as people start bringing in their phones and their other things, having these bring your own device policies are things that we really need to worry about from an attack vector. So those are three big ones that I am keeping an eye on.
Yeah. There's also, and Bob, if you could touch on the maybe cloud and cryptojacking briefly.
Sure. I mean, as you imagine, we've been using the cloud for quite some time, but more and more services are going to the cloud, and so one of the things that we're really concentrating on is having people be very careful on public Wi-Fi. Prime example, this whole remote work incident. You're sending people home, and they may have the default username and password for their Wi-Fi that came with the router. And I think gone are the days where I can drive in a neighborhood and get a totally open Wi-Fi on a regular basis. Thank goodness. But some of these passwords aren't easy to are easy to guess, right? Don't use your address, don't use your phone number, that kind of thing. Yeah, but even going into a public Wi-Fi scenario, make sure that you're given a password that's either just for you, where you have to go to a website and put in something just for you, or like a hotel room or something like that, or just tethered to your phone. We still have man-in-the-middle type attacks where people can spoof a Wi-Fi and everything goes through them, and they steal passwords that way. So just be careful in the public sector, in the public Wi-Fi area. Recently, I was on the news because the city of New Orleans is looking to make what they call a smart city and give residents free Wi-Fi. And I said, well, that's great until all of a sudden you give them free Wi-Fi, they're paying bills online, and that free Wi-Fi is open to anybody, and they're on the open network, and people get their bank account information. It has to be individually secure before you use it. Bottom line.
Okay. And I think the another area that falls under the other attack space kind of vector is software and insider attacks. Chris, could you can express some info on that?
Sure. Yeah. So there. First of all, I agree with all of what Bob just said, and it's again, it's part of that sort of changing landscape where before 12 or 18 months ago, relatively few people worked from Starbucks or the equivalent, and that has become much more prevalent in the last year or so. But another area that I think people need to be aware of is actually two things that are essentially email related. So one is we have this term phishing attacks, which is I think Michael made brief reference to, but it's when you receive an email that looks very legitimate. I think Michael's example was the 20th reunion of your college class or something like that, and so the ability to have appropriate tools that can look at those incoming emails and make an assessment of those, and in a lot of cases be able to say, nope, this is not a valid email, and as a result not have it ever get to the recipient. So that I think is an important area. It's a one with evolving technology, and the bad guys are trying their best to make that email look as legitimate as it can be, and the good guys are working harder than ever on ways to detect those. So that would be one. And then a second one would be again on email. We find that in our work with clients, there are many people who have the need in email communications to send sensitive information. So it might be that you're working with a particular customer or a particular vendor. Maybe they're not too technically savvy themselves, yet you have the need to be able to send some kind of sensitive information. And I think there's a good awareness in general today that it's not safe to send credit card numbers or social security numbers or other information like that via email. Yet if email is your sort of only or most easily available communication mechanism, there again are tools that can be put in place that do allow you to transfer that sensitive information via email, but have it done in a safe way. So another couple areas that that again can just incrementally increase your cyber resiliency.
Perfect. Well, again, I think that's all the time we have for today. Gentlemen, I really want to thank you for your contributions. And again, this has been really great. Folks, this will be available online. We'll make that available to everyone, so you can watch this after the show. And thank you so much.